Hopefully this is working now. So hello everyone, welcome to this stream from us at Anchore, the open source team who look after wonderful projects such as Syft and Grype. More on those in just a moment. I'm Alan. With me just down here somewhere are other members of the open source team. We've got Chris, as you can see if I hover my mouse over, Chris, Keith,
Hello.
and Dan down below me. We do this every week. We go through some of the issues, pull requests that people in the community have raised and have a little discussion, maybe resolve them, maybe leave a comment, maybe ask for more information. All the usual kind of open source gardening is what we like to call it. So feel free to join us. If you want to leave a message in the chat, go ahead. If you have contributions to make in any way, then feel free to join in, and I'll look out for those on one of these other screens. Everyone else is going to do most of the work. I'm merely a custodian of a terminal and a browser here and the OBS setup. Anything anyone else needs to say before we dive in?
No, I'm good.
Sweet. So on previous occasions, we've used one of my terrible scripts and I've improved it slightly. It's called Bug Roulette, and it goes around finding issues and pull requests for the team to deal with. Obviously, we could just go and look at GitHub, but it's a bit more fun like this. So what it does is give us a list of some open PRs and some open issues, and if there's any issues that we've marked that need discussion, we've tagged them as need discussion, then they're listed, and then it goes and gets a couple of random things for us to deal with. Every time we run this, we get, in theory, different random stuff down the bottom, but it will always show us needs discussion. So should we dive into the needs discussion? I've got a browser here ready and waiting. So this is not been open that long, actually, about a year as things go. I've seen older. And I think this was marked for needs a bit of investigation and discussion. Does anyone, I'll just scroll down and see if anyone's, I'll pop the bug number in the chat. So if anyone wants to click and have a look, they can do. Aha, I see you've spoken to them before.
Mm-hmm. I'm refreshing the context on this one. Let's see. So the first one is, I just want to be sure I understand what their expectation is for the tool. They expect a CVE to be reported multiple times, one from each database source. So it could be, when we do related vulnerabilities, right, we can have something that comes from NVD, we can have something that comes from GitHub, we can have it come from like a Linux upstream kind of security advisory. And sometimes if the CVSS information or the criticality differs across those sources, that can cause confusion. So he wants to either see one vulnerability from each database with the different criticality, or he wants us to just report on the highest severity, the database entry with the highest severity or highest metrics. So let's see what the discussion is. And that we show the primary information source that Grype matched on, right? Since you're correct, it would be excellent if we could add an option where the user could show most severe. Oh, okay. So yeah, let's see, an add configuration of severity display. Provide the right configuration to specify severity preferences.
And I don't know if it's entirely pertinent, but I've heard related asks for something like, hey, I just want to see the NVD severities specifically, and like, don't show me the other severities, or something along those lines.
We had another one where people were asking a specific level and above. It seems like there's a few asks for different like filtering mechanics of how you filter out what you get out of Grype, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, and I can see how this is annoying to the author because when we did the pivot over to the GitHub security advisories and the ecosystems that they support, if we match on the PURL for that for a given ecosystem, then the vulnerability that would show up would be the GHSA entry. And so then they would have to go into related vulnerabilities to find the NVD kind of criticality. So while the one that you just pulled up on the screen, Alan, the report by severity is analogous. Yeah, that's kind of analogous to this. That's more of like a view, like a slicing of they just want to see things in the critical or just want to see things in the medium or high. The one that we started on, 1378, is more if I've identified three vulnerabilities, right, and all of them have different criticalities, then they want some narrowing not on the value of the criticality, but on the data source itself, like where it came from. I think Charlie Romeo is specifically like interested in NIST vulnerability metrics and stuff that comes from NVD. If we have a related vulnerability to a GHSA match,
Is this something other people have asked? Like, I can see why you would want that. Like, if you believe one source is more authoritative than another, or maybe you have regulatory reasons why you should trust one over another. Do we get that a lot?
Sometimes, although I just want to I think it's important to distinguish between the logic that's being used to identify that there is a vulnerability available and the presentation of the material about that vulnerability. And that's where I think we need to be pretty crisp on topics like this, because how Grype determins that there is a vulnerability is very sensitive to the vulnerability data source. Like Bash 1.0 RPM can have backports from Bash 2.0, even though NVD says all Bash 1.0s are vulnerable, but Red Hat will backport patches into their Bash 1.0 that fix that problem. Right. So that's relevant to the match, right? So, our tool would say, no, you've got the Red Hat version of Bash 1.0. That's got the security fixes, so we're not even going to register it. Whereas, if there's some package and it's like, this package has CVE X, I can understand the ask being rephrased as, we want to know everything about X from all the different sources so that we can make determinations on, which one we care about and all of that. So I don't see clearly like the way to add filtering into the matching logic based on different vulnerability sources, but I do see there being something coming out of this, which is like allow the user to see more information, everything we know about a vulnerability, regardless of how it was matched. I think that's my interpretation of this ask in a slightly different way.
We already output like multiple lines if there's multiple different sources, don't we? We don't aggregate everything always.
That's correct.
But so again, it's more about the match. It's not about presenting all the information, because, Grype doesn't have all of the data sources, raw data sources in it. It has records about how we're going to do matches.
Okay. So do we have, like, is this something we just aren't planning to do, or we're not capable of doing with the way Grype is architected at the moment? Or
I think this one we would be capable of doing, with the caveat of what Dan said. Like when we match on something, like we are saying we think this is vulnerable to this particular thing, whether it's a GHSA or a CVE, a CPE match, or like whatever the thing is, we've matched something and we think it's vulnerable. And then there's a list of related vulnerabilities to that. And so like we could look in those related vulnerabilities and we could say, hey, here's the highest severity we found, or here's a specific severity from a specific provider if we find it in the match. So, I mean, it would be possible to do that. I think like what I'm hearing and is like, we should be very sensitive to making it very clear where that information is coming from. And also that like, we might be matching things in I guess in ways, I don't know. I think like, since we've matched something, it would be okay, right? To surface a different related thing. But I don't know, I may be missing some nuance here.
So for this user, and I can't remember if we had this option installed or contributed at the time of this filing, but if they are interested on the CVSS kind of information, yeah, it's really annoying because, to Dan's point, if you do buy CVE, you're still going to get primary vulnerability sources from like the Ubuntu upstream security advisories, or like the distro version of the security feed that patched your package, right? Doing by CVE is not always a guarantee of lifting up the NVD kind of like NIST data into the primary artifact of the match. So
nor is it always accurate. Nor is it always accurate, because like
correct.
if you convert what you see here, like this one has the Debian packages at the top and the NVD is related. But if you did the other way around and said, let's say your match was against NVD, and it's like related vulnerability, Debian package, and they say negligible, it's because in their assessment of the Debian package in Debian, it might not be affected at all, right? So like,
Right.
I don't know if there's like a one-shot way of just saying like, I trust Debian, because then you'll get a bunch of severities for things that aren't related to the Debian assessment at all.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's like an education of the users of the tool, and just like when you're looking at security results in general, of there might be like this, by fiat, we must use all NIST or all NVD data for our reporting, but the context does matter here, right? So you need some way of saying like, hey, this result from the security tracker, from the Debian upstream, is equivalent to, the NIST finding, in so much as they have more context and they have more ability to assess their own package that they're distributing, and not the catch-all kind of version that NIST is trying to publish, for all packages and all things and all distros and all places. So yeah, it's hard, because I would feel awkward releasing a view like this, because it might lead to people making assumptions about the criticality or vulnerability of their packages that actually is not the case for any given context of a scan.
If it adjusted the actual output, which is
right.
what the ask is, to like to be able to specify severity policies and stuff like that. But I don't know, my personal opinion is like a good alternative proposals to say, at the very least, we want to keep the matching logic the way it is because we think that's correct. Mm-hmm. But we should be able to add to the mix the ability to say, and here's what everyone else says about this vulnerability. It's not part of the matching logic. It's not something you can decide you prefer this severity assessment or that, but here's the information.
Yeah, what's the best way to display that? Because I've found too that when we have tried to do views like this, when we've done like post scripts that kind of like parse related vulnerabilities and show related severities under, people or users get very confused, and they go, well, I see negligible here on the front line, and on these indented lines I see high, and they go, which is it? And you always want to say, as the developer, you want to go, oh, it's the thing we reported at the top. This is just more information. But in that case, like the more information just leads to a more confusing report. Yeah, it's a tough one.
So is there a way forward for this that's beyond just documentation, or finding some way to present the data in a way that doesn't make one look more favored than another, one source look more favored than another, but just presents them holistically together and basically says, your decision, you've got all the data now?
Yeah, I want to key in on his question that came right after his initial issue, which is follow-on question: can a particular source be set as authoritative or for primacy? And I'm going to be aggressive on this one and say that's not something that Grype would ever want to consider. Like, I want to take what Dan said and kind of reframe it as, the matching logic is such that I don't think we ever want to offer a configuration path where someone supplants the like distro security feed for the NIST feed, right? Because those are choices that we make as the tool based on curating the data, and not that should be like knobs that can be tweaked. And that's a controversial take. That's an opinion, not like de facto, but that's where I think the tool should live. I don't think those knobs should be exposed. What do you guys think?
Well, I'd agree, but only because I can't think of a reason why that would work functionally, like to give you an actually good result. Like always consulting Red Hat's database for Debian packages makes no sense. Like we can't even reconcile. The identifiers don't line up and stuff like that. So
I mean, I guess well, Dan was talking about, the matching. I don't think we ever would really want to change the matching, but I don't really think that that's what they're talking about here. I think they're basically just talking about raising up, like in the case that we do have related vulnerabilities. I mean, as far as I understand it in the database, that means like they should be effectively the same thing, like, but just reported by different places. Is that not an accurate view of what that means in the database?
No, I don't think it's not, because what is happening here is we're matching off of the basis of the Ubuntu security team, given the context of the distro we found for that result, or the distro context of, hey, you scanned in Ubuntu, therefore we're going to use the Ubuntu upstream security feeds and not the NIST ones for the matching. So,
and it's an Ubuntu package.
Right, and it's an Ubuntu package, right? So those two things have lined up where we use the record that comes from the security feed from Ubuntu that says this is negligible versus, the NIST record, which would say it's like medium or high. And when we say that they're related, we just go, these have the same CVE identifier. You can reference them across ecosystems, right? But one team gave it this scoring and gave it this reasoning because it's the context of the Ubuntu distro, and one team gave it this scoring because they're trying to apply a general severity and kind of a general context of how much to worry about this across all things out there. So,
right.
Yeah.
So the NVD is you went and got the source code unpatched, compiled it, and you're running it on a box on the internet that lots of people have access to, and it's got a network connection. Worst possible case scenario, this could happen. Whereas the Ubuntu and the Debian CVE review would say, well, yeah, but we package it in such a way that there's no open ports, or we compile out that feature, or we patch it with a newer version, right?
Let me, maybe if I rephrase this. Okay, so when we have this data, like let's say I've matched on a Debian package and that has a related vulnerability to a CVE, right? Let's say that's the just CVE number. Like that's because Debian Security Tracker says this is the CVE that this record is for, right? Like, or are we magically doing that behind the scenes somewhere?
No, they use CVE identifiers as the ID.
Yeah, primary key equals primary key, therefore related. This is
okay.
Related.
So I match on this Debian package with this CVE, like, and I'm confident because the matching told me that this thing is what I have. The CVE, basically the related vulnerability that I get is the NVD thing, right? In theory. And so they're not saying that it's not vulnerable here. They're saying it is vulnerable and it is the same thing as this NVD thing. Now I know you can't flip it and say I matched the NVD thing and therefore this Debian one is the thing that I matched. But you could say I matched the Debian thing, therefore it is the same thing as this NVD thing. Maybe there's a new assessment that says it's wrong about the severity. Maybe there's some other stuff there, but how I guess I'm just not quite understanding why that doesn't hold true, why it can be it could mean something different in the related vulnerabilities.
Because
so we've had a comment. Sorry, I'll just interject so it's not lost. Zach Hill says hello. Hello, Zach. They said I'd suggest adding a field for severity by policy, where users could configure policies such as default, MVD, or highest related.
You said the last part? I'm trying to go to the comment.
I can copy and paste it and put it on the screen. I don't have a funky chat thing that lets you see. What's the easiest way I could do this though? This is like the most brutal way for me to show you a YouTube comment is to do that.
That's hilarious. Yeah. No, I pulled them up on my other screen now. Severity of arguments. Default NVD or highest related. If we were to put this option,
this is
go ahead.
effectively what the user, I think, was originally asking for. But what we're trying to talk through is, does that make sense? Because like in terms of like, does it actually work? Like, let's say you're scanning a material that is only Debian packages, and you decide to use the NVD severity instead of the Debian severity. I'm just not sure what you're gonna get from that. Like the Debian severity is the assumption a little bit, and like the convention is that's a more accurate assessment of that material, because the NVD severity was, to Alan's earlier point, was assessed against not the Debian version of that software, but the upstream version of that software, which is not the same software.
I would almost want to like put a caveat in the documentation. Like, if you use this option, you will get a measurably worse vulnerability report, because you're supplanting contextual analysis of like a specialized team of security engineers for a specific distro with a catch-all NVD analysis. Or, highest related is non-deterministic of those two sources, where you're just getting the people that screeched loud enough about it, which might not be the ones who did the actual specialized analysis of the package and the patching that was put on top of it for the release of that distro. So I'm still like very much not just even on the fence. I'm on the side of like not including that as a configurable portion of Grype, just because I don't ever want to include an option where a user could then use it to get a worse vulnerability report than what the default matching already gives.
I mean, side note, just this is complicated, as is clear from the discussion, but we do have a Grype explain where this might be an interesting area where this type of discrepancy can be explained. Like, I know that's not necessarily what that operation is for, but because it's not something that I feel like can be like easily presented in a table view without lots of columns and like text and caveats and stuff like that. It's another way to think of like, maybe this ought to be considered some context in the explain operation of Grype.
Well, and Zach also came back with a comment where he does, Zach does have good experience with actually talking with the engineering teams who have to use NVD. So it's not so much, they might also know that it's a worse result, but they're just by policy of their org or their bosses are saying, we don't care if all these are negligible, as by the Debian security feed, what does NIST say about it? And they need that kind of output. And so rather than munging through related vulnerabilities, they just want like a shortcut to get that output, which makes sense to me.
Yeah. But I mean, the information's there. It's just, the discussion is about whether or not to make it, something that can actually adjust the output of like the table view, that one severity assessment in there.
What's the alternative? If that's not implemented, what alternatives does the user have?
They instead, so like you were showing on screen before, Alan, instead of going to the table output, they would go to the JSON output for Grype, and then there is a field next to the primary match that says related vulnerabilities.
Is it just -o JSON or?
Yep, -o JSON, and you can just put that into any kind of document that you want to view. It's not as fun on the. Okay. Yeah, and if you scroll like to the position 0 of the matches, which should be at the top of the document, or any of these works. Keep scrolling until past artifact. Great. So you see vulnerability there, CVE 2023, and this is great. This is matched on security tracker Debian, right? And severity they gave it was unknown. But then if you go to related vulnerabilities, right, that's the NVD source, and they would extract In this case, they agree, but let's just imagine that NVD disagreed with the upstream security tracker of Debian. So users have to go in, parse related, find that the namespace is NVD:CPE, and then elevate that severity if you have some logic in your script that says if severities are different between upstream and if upstream is not NVD, show me the related NVD and tell me what the severity is from them. So
And you've
that's
got
what
the
they would have to
data
do now.
in like a programmatically, manipulatable format in as JSON, right? Like this. So you could do some of that automated, but you're still going to need a human in the loop to make the decision, right?
Well, you could like, in this case, if you wanted to just see NVD, you don't need the human. You could
Right.
just have a script that says, show me all NVD, even if critical or not. And then if you wanted to get even fancier, you could say, show me only if NVD criticality is greater than upstream severity or primary match severity. But the basis of the full question is, should Grype just have an option to do this rather than you parse the output and generate the report
Right.
yourself?
Yeah, to
Which,
just flip those
yeah.
two severity fields. Yeah.
And to Zach's comment from the chat, um, I think, yeah, I think I'm more on the fence now than I was like taking a hardliner, because the engineer doesn't have a lot of opinions about it. They might just be being told by a large org-wide policy that they need to see this report format. So they can get both reports and they can argue till they're blue in the face that the first one is better. But just by some policy, by some digest, some output that's needed, they need to be able to show that kind of disparity between the two. I've worked at places before where you do need that kind of thing, so that makes sense.
I've got one other tangentially related one. Let's say, for argument's sake, that the Debian tracker has severity unknown and NVD has a severity, which is less likely these days. But like, let's say that's the case, and we're probably going to show the unknown. And so now again, the user has to go through and like dig through stuff, and like they could say just like show me something that seems like I don't know. There are a few things that are related to that. I feel like that people have asked for. I'm kind of on the opinion that like make it explicit about where this information is coming from, but give them the knobs to see it relatively easily if that's what they need to do.
I agree with see it. I'm still not convinced that there's like that actually adjusting the primacy is a good idea, because we've only been talking about cases where the NVD severity assessment is higher, but the alternative is also a possibility. And if you're doing things like filtering by critical, you don't want to miss that the Ubuntu team is like, this is actually critical. NVD says it's negligible, but it's not in Ubuntu, right? So I'm not as comfortable about actually switching the primary severity via policy, because I think it's less safe. But I am a huge proponent of outputting multiple severities in a way that's consumable.
Is there some like data gathering we could look at some images and do comparisons where there is a significant difference? Like I get it if like one says medium and one says low, right? And you've got a conflict there. But if one says negligible and the other one says critical, then that might be more of a thing you want to bubble up. And I don't know how many of these type of CVEs are that way around or the other way around or closer together, and if there was a large number of them that were very wildly different between negligible and critical versus medium and high or low and medium, would that make you more likely to want to expose the twiddly knobs or not?
If there were more with discrepancies, I would say it'd make me less likely to think it would be safe to allow for the adjustment, because then the filters, you're going to be missing things one way or the other.
Yeah, the larger that like sample set is, then the more important it is to take the context like nuance version of the vulnerability match than it is to take the larger like kind of scattershot assessment from NVD. And
fair,
also the inverse being true as well.
To be fair, my concern is a little bit mitigated by Zach's idea of the like show only highest. It's just then you get non-determinism.
Yeah.
That's why Zach said that, I'm sure, right? Because it accounts for that problem.
Okay. So I can write up like a summary comments at the end of this one, Alan, of like kind of what we're thinking of what would be added. Um, we can kind of call needs discussion is off for this one. We'll like outline what the feature would be, but with the caveat of there's still some discomfort in putting it fully fleshed out that way. But maybe taking the smallest version of it would be what Zach put forward, and I think there's some agreement in that being okay to get on to at least do the dev work for.
That would be great. I guess the other question that we haven't asked is, what do other tools do? Like, do they have twiddly switches for exposing these kind of things, or are we common functionality with others?
I want to mention one other thing is that we have templating output, and like it's a little bit hand wavy at the moment, but like in theory, somebody could make a template that does what they want it to do here. I have actually a draft PR that's been sitting for quite some time that makes it fairly easy to make a table output in the template. So like there could be some way of determining that severity part to display that's different than our default thing, maybe. But like I said, it's pretty hand wavy, and there might be some like work needed to expose some like helper functions to make it not just insanely hard to write a template that does that.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got a path forward, which is Chris is going to type some words into this. I don't know if we want to like invite more conversation from outside, more opinions. I don't know like whether anyone would come up with a compelling argument for or against this. I like the idea of giving people, templating as a way to present the data the way they want to. The same data's in there, you just present it differently. I don't know. Cool. Any final thoughts on this before we move on?
No, I'm going to be just in the whole typing real quick, but I'll jump in on the next issue as soon as I finish this.
Sweet. Thank you. Let me get rid of all of those. And so that was the only one that we had that was tagged needs discussion. And unless anyone has one that's come up in the last 24 hours since I last looked at this, we could just dive into random community issues or pull requests. Should we spin the wheel?
Spin it.
Right, I'll spin it again. We got a pull request here. Oh, this is looking interesting because this was so. For those who don't realize, this is the pull request number, the person who filed it, when it was created, the description, the branch, and when it was last touched. So this is on Grype DB. So a jump across to a completely different project. Add support for OSV schemas. Let me drop the link in chat.
And the first thing I see here is looks like Alex even approved this one.
Okay, so it's bounced around a little bit. Oh, this is related to the Bitnami provider in Bonnell. Okay. Change is approved.
Looks like it needs a rebase, but I mean, I think maybe this one would be best, since I know Will was looking at the Bitnami stuff and looks like Alex already approved this one. Maybe we can just pause and skip to the next and follow up with them. I'll put a note to mention it and see if there was any reason that it wasn't merged.
Well, I mean, is that a reason not to merge it? Because
Well, yeah, but I mean, Alex approved it in like February.
Oh, I see.
expected it to have been merged around then. I'm not sure why it wasn't. So that's the question.
Okay, so we'll take that one as a offline action.
Yeah, I'll put a note to follow up on that one.
Sweet, thank you. I will go back to. We've got a random community issue. This one's in Grant. Ooh. So Grant, for those who don't know, is the tool for showing licenses within SBOMs. It's important to me to understand which layer the package exists. Oh, crikey.
Oh, well, can you thumbs up Lima's net? Because that's how I like sort by issues on these. It's everyone, because I have thought about adding this, but we need to just update Stereoscope basically. There's an entire like chain of updates that has to happen going into Syft where you can do either all or squashed. Stereoscope needs to be updated by showing layer by layer by layer. And then once we have that like catalog of file existing per layer, we can then say this license was discovered in this layer. And you can even show like a diff of how the file was added, removed, and added again across all of the layers, like if you did something weird in the Docker file. But currently, the output formats of Syft don't support this yet, so we have to do the update in Syft before we would do it in Grant. That's the short answer.
Right. Okay. So as I understand it, let me just see if I get that. So Syft currently can't represent when there are different licenses for different layers of the container that's been built.
It can't represent which layer a file was introduced on.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Are you able to put some notes on the bottom of this?
Yep, I'm almost done with this first one,
Nice.
so I can do this one.
I'll leave this one open, and we can always.
52.
Did I?
Yeah.
I didn't post it in here. Sorry. I'll put it in the chat because it helps the bots.
I think I also have the Syft issue where they're talking about adding multiple layers as like a different output between all layers and squashed. So I can link that as blocked.
Oh, you've got that, have you?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to go and find it, but I don't need to. So, spin the wheel. Ooh. This one's popped up again. Great. My random number generator clearly is not working very well here. What's this one? This is in scan action. We are jumping around all over the place. Nice to have. Currently, the output file name is hard-coded to results.json or results.serif on scan action. Is it?
One second.
So scan action, you can add to your repository and it generates the SBOM and scans. Well, actually, sorry. SBOM action generates the SBOM and scan action scans it. Output file name is hard-coded to results.json, is it?
This is not exactly how this works anymore. I'm pretty sure, yeah, the action surfaces two output parameters, one for serif and one for JSON. So you basically just always reference the output parameter for the file. So it's not like, it sort of doesn't matter what the file is named. And I think it's in a temporary directory anyway.
So it gets surfaced as like a GitHub action, like variable that you can.
Yeah. So if you just look,
internally,
if we just look at the repository, the scan action, the top level documentation for it, and then scroll down just a tiny bit to the thing that talks about a little past, I think past the inputs. Keep going. Okay, example work. One down a little bit further. Sorry. Okay, there. Yeah. So where they have the serif file, you see how it's got like steps.scan.outputs.serif. That's like, so it puts the file reference in a variable name. It doesn't really matter what it's named, and it doesn't put it in your local. It's like an attempt directory somewhere.
In the runner when the action
Yeah,
is
so you
running.
can just like a user can copy it to whatever file name they want.
Right. And they mention they've shown their action. Oh, and what?
I think that's what they're proposing. It looks like.
Oh, I see. They currently need to add an extra step.
Yeah. Oh wait, maybe no.
They I don't know. They don't need to add an extra step to do this upload though.
Right, because surely this could just say that.
It's exactly, yeah, that's all you need to do. So I'm not really sure what the issue is here.
There's an interesting sentence there that says this avoids automatic name clashes with results JSON produced by other steps in the same job.
So the thing, at one point, this was generating a results.json in the working directory. I'm pretty sure it's not doing that anymore. So let me just see if I can figure out.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So
The core
like
of
some
this
other
might have-
random
yeah.
action on the runner could also be generating a results.json, which is a pretty generic name.
Yeah.
I see. That makes more sense now to me.
That might be why they had to do this in the first place, like something
Mhm.
else. They're getting a clash, and then
Yep, sadly, that's what it's doing. Indeed, still. Yeah.
Is that the code that they link to here? Right.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Right. Okay.
yeah. So the options here would be to make it configurable, which would have the user have to make some more decisions, or add a UUID or something like that to the file, like really make it a temp file, to Keith's earlier point.
Yeah, and you can just
That-
output it to a temp directory. Like I would prefer it be output to a temp directory, so it's like not even in the workspace anywhere.
Yeah.
By default.
That might be, maybe something to propose back, because then there would be even fewer things to decide, right? It just happens, and if you want to snarf it, you can get it from that variable and
Right.
do whatever you want.
Yeah, I think the reason that we probably never made that change is that it would break everybody who's using that file reference today. So it would probably have to be like a major version bump on the action, but that's okay if we need to do that. Okay, I'll follow up and suggest this other alternative here on this issue.
Nice. Thank you. Spin the wheel. Ooh. Right, do you want a PR or an issue? You could choose.
You're the MC.
Okay, you get an issue. Oh, good. Another scan action. Oh, I replied. So we asked them to test it again because we think this is fixed. So we haven't had a reply in 2 weeks. We could reply and say, as I said, we believe this is fixed. Feel free to reopen it or file a new bug on a more recent issue if you're still seeing problems. Fair? Or
Yeah, I think close.
Sweet. I'll just do a quick comment.
Sorry, I have now finished all comments that I've signed myself up for, so I'm free again for commentary.
Boom. Right. Spin the wheel. Ooh, now we've got a bunch of these that I've seen, So I'm glad one of these popped up. These are for the homebrew Syft. So this is the repo that controls the brew builds of Syft. And I've seen a few of these, and I think probably there was a timing problem here. There's another one there where there was a hash mismatch, and some of them is due to us maybe creating a draft release and it not being fully released yet, and this GitHub action or whatever it is that does the brew release goes and yoinks the package a little bit too early. The hash doesn't match and it fails. So it looks like a timing, issue and not actually a code issue. Well, other than perhaps this whatever action that's running here could be more robust or triggered in some way. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I suspect there's probably just a GitHub action in here somewhere. No, there isn't. Oh, it's a bot. Okay.
Yeah. So the Ruby file gets updated by the Go releaser bot, which gets triggered by the Go releaser step of our releases.
Right.
This is like from a long time ago.
Exactly.
I can try and install Syft at that again, or we can just close it and say.
So I don't think this would have been a problem back then, but I think it's not a problem now. So I think this should just be closed.
Yeah, we've significantly updated our how this release process has worked since 0.41.4. So I don't believe the timing problem would exist anymore.
Okay.
But let me just double check. But I'm going to keep this tab open. I'll reopen it, close, and I'll reopen if I find anything that's weird.
Sweet. Right, we've got 10 minutes left, so let's pick a couple of good ones. Ooh. I think we might know what this one is. Fail when Grype can't check for a database update. So they're running before change when running, it would fail sometime. Oh, because they're doing everything normally though. After update when running. Sorry, what's the difference between... Oh, I see.
The issue is, I think the issue is that when Grype checks to see if there's an updated database, but has an existing database that it currently can use, the update check fails and it says, oh, I can't find an update, but then it continues on and runs with the existing database that's there.
Right.
And this user wants, if that check fails, to just completely fail the scan altogether, which I think is a valid ask. If if you're not getting updated things, with the caveat that there already is also like a staleness check on the database. So like if that happens for many days, eventually it'll say, hey, we're not updating the database. You've got an old database, and fail that way. But it wouldn't fail if like the database is a day old and they want it to be fresh every day. I mean, I think it's a valid ask, and then if the case is if they don't want it to fail, they can like not have it check for the update or whatever. There are some ways to run a check or run Grype without it checking for an updated database.
If you set the environment variable that says don't go and check for updates, it still pulls a database if there isn't one, right?
No, it doesn't check. It doesn't pull a new database at all.
But also,
if there wasn't one, if there isn't one locally, like brand new clean installation of Grype.
Oh, yeah. If there isn't one locally, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
I think Alex's comment on the issue, 1247, is, I don't know if this pull request addresses it. I haven't looked at the PR yet, but when he says we don't want the UI to lie to the user about it, like we don't want the UI to say there is no DB update available if you're running it offline. Like if it didn't even go and check, and if it got like an error back, like that's perfectly within the parameters of, yeah, I don't want my box talking to the network right now. I know I have a DB locally, and it's not that Grype couldn't find or that there is no DB update available. It's just some other message should be printed that says Grype operating in offline mode, right? And that's like right now it would be lying to the user if it's offline and runs the check and fails silently where it says there's no DB update available. Sorry, I muted myself. What does that PR change, Keith? Because it looks like you commented on it. Does it change the actual messaging, or is it is it like a status code change?
So let's see. So it returns an error. Okay, and what that results in is, I'm pretty sure, like, it has the result that the whole thing fails just the way that he wants, but it also means that Grype returns non-zero exit code, which also means that there are vulnerabilities. And I think the problem is that, like, we didn't have a way to differentiate, this is a failure updating the database exit code 2 or something versus vulnerabilities exit code. And I think that was the crux of why this wasn't merged as it is.
So it's 0 is everything went okay, no vulnerabilities found. Anything else is vulnerabilities found.
Today, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it means today. And so if we change this, and so now it's returning an exit code when everybody was expecting that to be the vulnerabilities are found, like that's, and there's no way to differentiate the fact that it was a database update check problem instead. I don't know, like maybe the thing is to like add yet another flag for this. It seems like a bit overkill, but
I mean, like what are we currently exit code? Is it just like 0 or 1? Is that all we get? Or
I think so.
Well, follow the thread though. There is a link at the bottom that Will put in. There was a PR that was taken to adjust its go up a little bit further.
Exit code 100 is a free exit code, not reserved for another meeting. So we do 100 from this. Had some unseen effects, maybe.
Yeah, it was sorry. The PR, it's Grype pull 1463. That was referenced from 1247.
Thanks. Nice.
Right, this one was merged. So Will is pointing out this. I mean, the original issue was that they wanted Grype DB update to not say there's no new vulnerability data available when there was an error, and then have it fail. But instead, it was saying there's no new update available and exiting 0. Grype DB update, not Grype scan, but the operation Grype DB update.
Yeah, and this doesn't. Yeah, this
addresses that.
This addresses that in like a different way than the user wanted, because it adds the flag for the DB check command. But that's okay, because we can just forward them along and say, hey, we know you were scanning and getting this output in the scan. The scan is still reserved for 0 and 1 status codes of, vulnerabilities being output versus not. Go and please use the DB check, and that will give you this 100, which you can fail before running scan, which then gives you the pipeline information you need to like short circuit or understand kind of where you are in the DB fetching process. So I think it's a good compromise solution before we don't need to get it to the main command.
If I'm reading both of these correctly, this person would have to add a step for like Grype DB check, fail on update with this flag here, and then they would get an error code which tells them that there's a DB update available. But then I guess they would have to run a Grype DB download. Like they couldn't just run Grype next, because then Grype would just say, like, would not return the error because there was no checking there. And it would fail to download it because of whatever reason. Right? Am I like mixing things up here? I think that this would be like highly inconvenient for this person to like they'd have to do like 2 extra steps just to.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it like invalidates it, but it's context to actually like there is a way to achieve this functionally which doesn't mean the issue is closed, but if it's urgent to try to differentiate, we in a scriptable way, it is possible because of that other merge.
Right. They want to fail when Grype can't check for a DB update. That command will fail when it can't check for a DB update. Yeah, it kind of grows. It grows what they have to write as far as using the tool, which is inconvenient, but it is a quick fix. They could supplant this and get the desired effect. I'm still not like sure if Grype itself. I'm convinced that Grype should not fail itself when it can't check for a DB update. I think it should just be smart enough to output that it's offline and we're still running with the DB that we have, or it goes, hey, I checked for a DB update. There's some server error at that end. I'm going to still run with what I have against the vulnerability report. Like, I still think the tool should be that smart.
So I think there's a nuance here. If they run the Grype DB update check, it fails if there's a DB update or if it can't check for the update. Like, so it'll return like different error codes, but error codes in both of those cases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the logic would have to be if DB check fails, then attempt to do an update. If that fails, bail out. If it succeeds, run Grype.
Yeah, right, exactly. So those two extra steps, then they could do it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's convenient, but it's scriptable, and I think the logic maps.
So, who wants to attack a response there? I mean, there already has been plenty of conversation on this one.
Before that, I think I kind of agree with this person though, that like the behavior of Grype is to try to run with the most accurate, most up-to-date vulnerability information by default. And if something prevents that from happening, then they should by default probably be notified for that. And if they don't care and want to run anyway, having a flag that they could just set in their pipeline to continue on would be a pretty simple thing to do there.
I agree. I agree that there isn't like one behavior or another that covers all the cases. This is a case I believe should be configurable. And then that's a matter of choosing which is default. And I think either way is going to be okay for somebody.
Exactly. Yeah. Somebody will want it one way or versus the other inevitably.
But as long as it's configurable, then, I think that could be fine.
Okay. How about, I'll take, sorry, what was the PR number, Alan?
The PR is,
I can find it.
1247.
1247.
Okay. I'll take on trying to shepherd this one. I'm going to try to change it around to the way that I think it should work. And then we can have a discussion about that and either close it or accept it. Does that sound like a good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. That's a great way to wrap up. I think we're done. We're out of time shortly. That's been very good. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate sharing your knowledge of the internals and the history of all of these projects, shepherded by my dumb script. I really appreciate that. So thank you everyone for joining us. If you want to know more, you'll find our Git repos all over here on github.com/Anchore. There's a little bit on the website if you go to anchor.com/open source. Maybe we'll see you next week. Feel free to leave a comment or get in touch with us via various ways that you can see on the screen now. And we'll see you next time. Thanks all of you. Really appreciate it.
Excellent.
Well,
thanks
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.